Chapter 12. Anguish under the Moonlight.
The images of the memory slowly faded. Memories became memories again, and the flickering of the campfire in the night reappeared before his eyes. Garen's gaze swept over us all. We were an enigma. Many unknowns about us needed to be cleared up. There was still a coldness in the relationship between us and the two elves. Olwen did not seem very interested in our nature. He was too arrogant to care about us, too proud. Or perhaps he was avoiding us for some reason. Perhaps he was protecting himself from painful memories that perhaps only his friend knew about. But as for Garen, his curiosity drew him powerfully to us, though he tried to keep it hidden. Another wild howl whipped through the camp from one side to the other. This time it sounded much closer than the last, causing us all to rise from our deep slumber with a jolt.
They will not come any closer.
Olwen reassured us, his mood calm and serene. Such assurance did not prevent us from feeling fear, but at least they kept it at bay. I was too deep in thought to notice that Claudia had left her place by the fire. She got up and sat beside Alex. She had a pleading look in her eyes. He knew exactly what she was proposing.
"Oh no, dear. Please don't,"
he said as soon as she opened her mouth.
"Why not?"
the young woman's voice said in a playful tone. Alex gestured around them.
"I don't think this is the time."
"Please."
she pleaded.
"Let's sing something. It will make us feel better. It'll help us forget the bad times and remember the good."
Alex rubbed his forehead, feeling a little uncomfortable. But he was incapable of refusing her when she got all soppy with him.
"We don't have a guitar."
"We don't need one."
"Oh God, okay then. I'll do the second voice for you, but only that. Please, Claudia. Something easy, eh?"
"The Ghost Woman and the Hunter,"
she suggested.
"Is that all right with you?"
Alex agreed. She smiled at him with satisfaction. She sat down and cleared her throat. Her voice rose in the cold night. Slowly, quietly, almost in a whisper. Olwen, who had been watching her without much attention, opened his eyes much wider than usual and sat up. I remember looking at her, momentarily lost to the world, as she intoned the verses of her melancholic ballad. I was not able to recall the words exactly, but I remember they were undoubtedly sad. In time, everyone around the campfire was bewitched by her gentle voice, mesmerized by the angelic vision of the beautiful young woman in front of them. Another voice joined in with the song. Alex, drawing a smile from Claudia's lips, finally decided to accompany her. With a voice that seemed too soft and warm to be that of a man, he sang in unison with his angelic partner. And singing together hand in hand, they brought the beautiful melancholic lyrics of the song to life and to our ears. Although the ballad called for tears, soon the two musicians had brought a smile to our faces. The emotional impact of the moment was contagious. Claudia had not only managed to dispel her own fears, her melodious voice had helped us to unite as one and to forget almost everything that was going on around us for a few magical moments. Even Dickie, who tried so hard to look indifferent, could not help watching her. It was impossible not to. The little brunette had never been more captivating. The young woman had an aura that could hypnotize the very wild beasts that were howling around us. I remembered a previous conversation with Alex, in which he asserted that the real Claudia was in front of us.
"She literally transforms herself on stage,"
he assured me.
"She really does."
Now I understood many things. It was not so strange to differentiate between the Nyode on stage, so vibrant and self-assured, and the shy, fearful Claudia, who accompanied us on this strange trip. When her voice finally ceased to fill the air, the whole group burst into applause and compliments, which she accepted with a radiant smile. The precious, captivating muse had vanished, returning to the blushing, shy 20-something she was. The spell was gone. Alwen did not applaud with the same fervor as everyone else. More reserved, he merely bowed his head slightly and smiled at her. It was the kind of smile that comes to one's lips when one's soul has been captured by another. But in that fleeting moment, when their gazes met and merged for a few seconds, I saw something else flicker in her eyes. This something else was unpredictable and inexplicable. That something else was like a sparkle of light, like a star hiding on the red horizon of the sunset. And at that moment, I felt jealous of the brave elf and everything around him. Away from us, Alwen continued to gaze intently at Claudia, who, logically, overwhelmed by our praise and compliments, could give him no more than a fleeting glance. Silence had fallen over the campsite. It was deep into the night. Nothing but the chirping of nocturnal birds broke the silence of the forest. Alwen took advantage of the fact that we were all asleep to leave his place by the campfire. He had spent the rest of the evening lost in his thoughts, his gaze lost in memories of the past, perhaps a distant past. He moved to where he had laid his fearsome sword, resting in its sheath, and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Claudia was pretending to sleep. With half-opened eyes, she spied on the hazy images of the elves that fascinated her so much. And so, like a naughty child hoping to trick an adult, she furtively watched Alwen's attractive and enigmatic form disappear into the night. Her curiosity got the better of her. Why was he going alone into the woods at such a late hour of the night? Even though it was a crazy idea, the desire to follow him became an obsession in her mind, although she was unsure of the real reason, the deeper motive for wanting to. Claudia waited as Garin prepared to take first watch for the night. Then, very slowly, the young woman threw off her blankets and, crouching low, managed to tiptoe a few steps away from the fire. Garin, who was more concerned with organizing his belongings, seemed unaware. When she thought she was out of sight, Claudia stood upright to face the cold darkness of the night and stepped into the embrace of the forest. Kala's moon was sometimes hidden behind the clouds that swept across the night sky, but it still gave off a powerful, clear light. It was enough to see where you were going and illuminated the ground around you. The glowing orb rose slowly in the night sky, silhouetted against the high canopy of trees. All went well at first, until the glow of the camp was lost behind her. She had walked farther than she had imagined, trying to guess which way the elf would have gone. Soon, the light from the sky was not enough. The shadows grew larger and larger around her. Then the forest, like a living thing in motion, began to unnerve her. The thousand sounds of the night began to invade and unsettle her spirit. The patter of her own footsteps seemed deafening in the silence of the night. She could feel her blood pumping fast through her veins. She began to feel frightened. Going into the forest alone in the middle of the night was never a good idea. Why on earth had she done it? There seemed to be a powerful desire within her that was subconsciously influencing her decisions. It was almost impossible to ignore, even though she was putting herself at risk. However, the rational part of her mind was starting to resist. She felt a shiver go down her spine. There was no sign of Alwen, no sign of the bonfire, only darkness. Branches swayed in the wind. The gnarled roots of the trees seemed to move alongside her, slithering through the bushes like a snake. Fear is a powerful, obsessive emotion. It makes you see things that were never there, to hear sounds that are stranger than normal. Claudia felt as if the trees had a life of their own, as if their branches were reaching out to catch her in their crooked, ebony fingers. The wind seemed like an intelligent, demonic entity, trying to scare her with ghostly noises as it whistled through the trees. She looked around at every step, fearing that something was hiding in the bushes. She tried to calm herself, but the fear she felt was uncontrollable and started to play with her mind.
What if in this strange world the trees could walk or demons could look like the wind?
Her heart began to beat at full speed. A moment of lucidity entered her mind.
What am I doing here? Why the hell am I doing this?
The exchange of glances with Alwen at the end of her performance had struck her deep inside. She could not shake it off. There had been something in him beyond the natural, beyond her understanding, as if something secret had awakened deep inside her. It was unlike anything she had ever felt for anyone before. It was incomparable to anything she had experienced before. Alwen was an attractive and captivating man, no doubt, but was not really her type. However, the memory of her former boyfriend and the emptiness of their breakup seemed worthless compared to the emotions that the dark-haired elf had instilled in her. But there was something else. Something more than a simple attraction to a good-looking, mysterious stranger. But that alone could not justify where she was now, nor the reckless way in which she was acting. But it was already too late. She was about to turn back when she heard the crack of a branch nearby. A startled bird took flight, crashing through the foliage in an effort to escape any potential aggressor. The sound of flapping wings and snapping twigs released the tension pent up within her, causing her to let out an uncontrolled, hysterical scream. Her heart beat wildly within her chest. Before she could recover, she heard the howling of some kind of wild beast. It seemed much closer than she would have liked. The wolves. She had forgotten the wolves. How could she forget something like that? Her hair stood on end. Panic set in. The sound of something running towards her at pace reached her ears. Something seemed to be making its way through the undergrowth towards her. She couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was, but it was definitely coming in her direction. Basic survival instinct drove her to retrace her steps. She turned and, instinctively, walked back the way she had come, not paying attention to where she was going. At first, she walked at a brisk pace, trying to maintain some sort of composure. But soon her legs had accelerated so much that everything around her became a blur of hazy images. Feeling like she was being chased, Claudia soon lost control of her emotions and senses. She began to panic and soon found herself running at full speed. She had no idea in which direction she was heading, nor where the camp was. Trees, mist and shadows blended together as she fled in terror through the forest. She soon realized that something was chasing her, getting closer and closer by the second. In her desperate flight, spurred on by extreme fear, she could only glimpse the dark figure that rushed towards her at great speed. She screamed as it leapt on her and knocked her to the forest floor. As if the heavens had fallen upon her, she hit the ground with the full weight of her attacker upon her. The impact was hard, but her brain had little time to think about it. Predator and prey rolled together on the ground for a few yards, colliding with stones, roots, and branches, until they came to a halt. She had landed face down on the ground, trapped by the body of the thing that had assaulted her. She was out of her mind. All she could do was scream and kick in desperation, convinced that at any moment she would feel the sharp fangs of a growling beast rip at her throat. Then strong hands grabbed her and flipped her onto her back. Her wrists were pinned to the floor with a force far greater than she could resist. A scent, a recognizable, intimate scent, filled her nostrils.
Hold still. Be quiet.
A familiar voice said.
Calm down.
The rationale part of her mind had recognized who the hunter was, but her body was still in a state of panic and would take time to calm down. She continued to struggle.
Damn it. Listen to me. Shut up for once.
He shouted in frustration, shaking her roughly by the arms. The rough treatment and the energy in his voice brought Claudia to her senses. She snapped her eyes open to see a shadowy silhouette staring back at her through its bright green eyes. She had known who her antagonist was before she had seen him. She had sensed it deep inside herself. But her body still refused to accept that she was safe. And opening her eyes to find those glowing green eyes right in front of her faces did not have a calming effect on her.
It's me. Alwen.
Her attacker shouted.
I'm not going to hurt you.
The elf was on top of her, pinning her arms to the ground and making it impossible for her to move. His black hair fell on either side of her head, surrounding her face as if it was in a picture frame. Claudia felt the handsome man's body over hers, sensing the vibration and tension of his strong, taut muscles against her soft skin. Their breaths merged, and their pounding hearts beat as one. He could feel her racing heart, as if it wanted to burst out of her body and into his. She had the strange feeling that she had led Alwen exactly to where she wanted him to go. As absurd as it might seem, this was precisely the outcome her subconscious was looking for. Rationally, it made no sense. And consciously, she would never have planned something so devious. But deep down inside, she had the strange certainty that she had achieved her goal. Still, the awkward situation troubled her. They lay together for a moment which seemed to last forever.
What were you doing alone in the forest?
Alwen's question snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked away from him in a gesture of pride. Here she was. She felt the incomprehensible certainty that this uncomfortable situation was exactly what her subconscious had wanted to occur. By making her obsessed with the idea of finding the intriguing elf, it had brought her right here. However, at the same time, the whole thing embarrassed her. It put her in a potentially humiliating situation where she was clearly exposed and defenseless, and there was no dignified way to emerge unscathed, except to accept the facts and run with it. What could she say in her defense? I came out to find you. Something inside me forced me to do something stupid to get your attention, to tell you that I'm here, that I exist, to get you to notice me. Don't you see me? Can you not recognize me? Can't you see it's me? Looking stupid was far better than explaining the strange truth behind her behavior, especially when she herself was unable to make any deeper sense of what she had just done.
I was just out for a walk,
she replied, trying to act normal and downplay the situation.
On a walk.
Alwen thought the woman was treating him like an idiot. With a sharp tug, he pulled her off the ground and forced her to stand.
Just a walk? Damn you! You were fleeing in panic. You were acting hysterically. You're not even armed, although the way you're riding, I doubt you're capable of wielding a sword. Do you have any idea what's out there?
He pointed his finger into the dark depths of the forest.
No, of course you don't. So tell me, where were you really going?
Claudia was speechless. There was no way out of this confrontation. Alwen glared at her with irritation. His green eyes glowed eerily in the gloom of the forest. All she could do was hit back.
And where were you going?
That's none of your business,
the elf replied.
I could tell you the same thing.
Oh, come on, girl. I'm 3 times your age and fully armed. Don't doubt I can take care of myself.
I can take care of myself too, I assure you.
Of course you can, I don't doubt it.
Alwen's sarcasm infuriated her. She probably hadn't really thought about what she was going to do next, at least not carefully. Nor had Alwen expected such a reaction from the young woman. Before Alwen's expression of sarcasm had dissipated, it was replaced by a look of surprise, as he felt a stinging slap from Claudia's hand across his face. The elf's face contorted in pain as he brought his hand up to his sore cheek. Rage filled the emerald embers of his eyes.
And if I were a bear, would you defend yourself against he with slaps?
Claudia was still filled with anger. She could see nothing in Alwen's response but another display of sarcasm intended to humiliate her. Her hand tried to return to that insolent face. This time it didn't hit the target. The elf's skilled hand swiftly deflected the blow before it could reach his face. And it did so with such indifference that one might have thought he was trying to swat away a fly. Claudia stumbled back. She tried a third time, with much more force than before. This time Alwen caught her hand at the wrist. She tried to struggle free, but the warrior's arm was like an oak branch. It was like trying to escape from a limb made of stone. She had never met a man like that before, except, perhaps, when she fought Hansi in a play fight. The young woman felt herself lifted in the air and held fast in a grip of steel until she collapsed into the strong man's arms. He put her down, but she continued to struggle. Just one of Alwen's arms was enough to wrap around both of her limbs like a belt of muscle. She tried in vain to break free from his tight embrace. Her furious attacks only succeeded in digging the metal net from the elf's chainmail into the soft skin of her back. The elf's free arm appeared armed with a broad knife. A small blade compared to the massive sword he usually carried, but no less fearsome. Its long blade glinted in the moonlight only a second before its razor-sharp edge grazed her delicate neck. She could feel the tension and inordinate strength in the elf's muscles. She realized that she would not be able to move until the elf decided to let go. She could also feel the rage that gripped him. In a flash of lucidity, she realized that she was at the mercy of a violent stranger who had a large knife pressed against her neck in the middle of the night. Nothing would stop him if he decided to slit her throat right there and then. For a moment, she felt fear. The fear that she had provoked by getting into a situation she could not control, and that was now getting out of hand. And then she caught that smell again. That intense and powerful scent that seemed to encode a message for her. A message that something inside her was desperately trying to make her understand. It was his body scent, as if this elf's genetic code had been transformed into a blend of intense, delicious odors. A scent that could only be appreciated when they were touching, skin on skin. A scent that told her, "I will never hurt you." He, on the other hand, listened to the furious beating of her heart, vibrating through the delicate frame of the young woman he held in his sturdy arms. He looked at her. Alwen's bright eyes contemplated the defeated young woman and recognized that special something that he struggled to define or name. The same something that made him keep his word to the person he now held in his hands. The same something that prevented him from leaving her to her fate. The same something that seemed to hover over her, bringing back flashes of visions and memories from the past that had just as quickly dissipated with dizzying speed. She was incomprehensibly bewitched by the irresistible magnetism of her attacker. Inside, she felt herself at a cruel and absurd crossroads. There was something familiar in those eyes, in that look. Her feelings for him were now deeply conflicted. She found it strangely hurtful how Alwen had employed his physical strength and sarcasm against her. Trapped in his tight embrace and an inch from his mouth, she couldn't decide whether to spit in his face or kiss him. They were both locked in an endless gaze when a rustle of branches in the nearby foliage startled them. Alwen reacted rapidly, releasing the young woman and drawing his colossal sword in one swift movement. The blade glinted brightly in the light of the moon. A figure with golden hair emerged from the trees holding his sword in a defensive stance. His eyes swept the scene, looking from his friend, the young woman, and then back again. He frowned with suspicion.
"What is going on here?"
he said, not letting his guard down.
"I heard the girl scream."
Alwen motioned for him to lower his weapon.
You're a bit late, Garin, don't you think?
What the hell is she doing here?
Asked the blonde elf, as he returned his sword to its sheath.
That's what I'd like to know.
The dark-haired elf reproached him.
Is this your way of keeping watch, Garin? It is a miracle we are still alive.
Garin decided not to answer as he approached the pair. He knew Alwen was right, and that he was indirectly responsible for the young woman's presence.
Take her away.
Alwen ordered his friend, sheathing his sword.
And if she gives you any trouble again, tie her to a tree trunk and cover her mouth.
I hate him.
Claudia sat by the campfire, still angry and upset. She felt bad about what had happened, but the elf's words and attitude had made her feel even worse. How could he be so...
I hate him,
she repeated to herself just to make sure of it. She heard footsteps behind her, and, before she could turn, she felt the soft touch of her furry blanket against her skin. Garin gently draped it over her shoulders, and she made herself comfortable in her newly provided cloak. The blonde elf took a seat on the trunk of a nearby tree. He carried a small leather pouch and his quiver of arrows. He set the quiver and bow aside. He thrust his sword into the ground next to him and settled down to work on a piece of wood he pulled from the bag.
He's such an idiot.
Claudia had been lost in her thoughts and didn't realize that she had spoken them out loud. A voice behind her let her know that she had been heard.
I'm sure I know who you're talking about. Welcome to the Way with Orwen.
Claudia turned to face Garin and noticed that he had not looked up from his task. She had such confusion in her thoughts that she felt the need to clear the air with someone.
Yes, that friend of yours is quite a character, you know. I've never seen a more tactless guy. He's a perfect jerk. He's rude, arrogant.
And stubborn as a mule, isn't he?
The young man continued to Claudia's astonishment.
Yes, exactly.
She confirmed, a little confused.
And he grunts as if he always has a handful of thorns stuck up his arse.
Claudia found the mental image amusing, and it managed to ease the tension.
Besides that, he's also intolerant. Proud as a bull and rabid as a male in heat. I've ridden beside him for more years than I can count. There's nothing you can tell me about him that I don't know.
And why do you continue to put up with him?
Garin looked at the girl with a glint in his eyes.
Because all these years,
he said in a friendly tone,
have also shown me that he is the noblest and most loyal heart you will find on your path. He's a damned suicidal fool who seems to mock death, that's for sure. But also the fiercest warrior that has ever walked the earth. The finest and bravest sword of all time. Yes, that's Alwen. Quite a character. Rough, harsh, sometimes cruel, but sublime in his own way. It is the price he must pay for his mixed blood.
Mixed blood?
She thought, and couldn't resist the temptation to take her blanket and approach the handsome elf. The truth was that we had had little conversation with them of any substance, so the fact that Garin was so talkative was worth taking advantage of.
Well, the truth is undeniable,
the handsome young man said as if stating the obvious.
It is easy to see that our veins do not run with the purity of blood that elves demand of their bloodline. My mother was an elf, but neither she nor the rest of the clan ever revealed my father's identity. All I know of him is that he was one of your kind, a human.
Claudia listened intently to the elf. He continued.
However, Alwen knew his father and had a very deep bond with him. He was not a human, as is the most common case with half-breeds. But no, to the despair of the patriarchs of the clan, the offspring growing in the womb of one of their daughters was of dwarven lineage.
Garin looked up and met the girl's dark eyes. He saw something in them that silenced him for a moment. It was a fleeting glimpse, like a flash in his memory. He had seen a look like that before. A long time ago, he had been in a situation where his words had triggered an identical reaction. How could it have been so similar? But he pushed the thought away and continued.
The worst part was not that the unborn child would carry the blood of the enemy in its veins. What really irritated the clan patriarchs was that Samara, mother of Olwen, younger sister of Isil Valadhor, Prince of the Edge of the World, and squad arm of the Arcane Feathers, really loved the father of her offspring.
Slowly, Claudia began to understand the deeper meaning of what Garin was telling her. She began to realize what was truly amazing about this story. If what came out of the young elf's mouth was true, Olwen was a half-breed of unprecedented origin, a mixture of elves and dwarves. The differences between the two races were not unknown to her. Their well-known rivalry, often combined with mutual contempt, is a regular feature of our own folklore and literature. In any case, it was quite logical for such concepts to remain consistent between the two worlds. It reflected the fact that both races had incompatible characteristics, causing the deep sense of antagonism they felt for each other. Claudia didn't know whether it was this obvious contradiction in his nature that made her hate the half-breed's rough temper with rage, or whether, on the contrary, it was precisely this that made her feel inexplicably attracted to him. As for me, I had little idea of our two companions' nature at the time, although the difference between a pure elf and a half-elf, so obvious to the eyes of the former, is almost imperceptible to the rest of us. I must admit that while I had no suspicions about Garin, Olwen's muscular frame had led me to doubt his elven purity. However, the last thing I would have thought was that it was the dwarven bloodline which would define his unique physiology. Garin paused for a moment before continuing.
Within Olwen, there is an inner conflict, an antagonistic struggle between two irreconcilable worlds. In appearance, he is fully elven, but his heart and soul have the courage and temperament of the dwarves. He is a dwarf living in an elven body, and an elf who thinks and feels like a dwarf. I must admit, even he doesn't know where one begins and the other ends.
You speak of him as a lover would,
she said, surprised at the tender and intimate nature of Garin's description of his friend. He curled his lips into a broad grin and couldn't help but chuckle slightly at the comment.
Maybe it's because deep down, there's something of a love affair in this whole matter.
Garin paused again, a smile on his lips. He was well aware of the suggestion he had just hinted at.
Anyway, perhaps I speak of him that way because there are few memories in my life where that hot-blooded half-breed doesn't appear one way or another.
Have you known each other that long?
That long, yes indeed,
he confirmed.
I bet I knew that wrathful bastard before your parents were even born. We are of the same clan, the Sanchari clan, from the high forests of Armin. And since the day of my banishment, we have not been separated. Well, though now since the Temple Rebellion and the war, nothing is as it used to be.
Claudia was deep in thought, still pondering his words from a few sentences before. Looking at their faces, no one would believe that either of them were even in their 30s. And yet, suddenly, an image flashed through her mind. Elves are long-lived. What other explanation could there be? Although, what I am about to tell you did not come to my knowledge until much later in the story. I can confirm that an elf has a life expectancy of about 2.5 centuries, and even so, it is not uncommon for elders to live much closer to the 3rd century. Elven babies grow at the same rate as human newborns until about 10 years of age. From this age on, the aging process and metabolism of elven children begins to slow down until the age of 30. This day symbolizes an elf's coming of age, and they are therefore considered adults. By this time, their physiognomy already resembles that of a human adolescent, Beyond this time, the aging process of their body usually balances out at a rate of 10 years for every 30 years of human life. Therefore, what looks to us to be a handsome, mature elf could actually have an age of 100 years or more. Or, as in the case of our friends, these handsome young men are well over 50. Claudia hesitantly asked his age, trying not to show her surprise when Garin confessed that he had lived for 91 years.
Alwen is 14 years younger than me, but I don't suppose you noticed. I don't blame you. Nobody usually does.
Claudia couldn't believe her ears.
Tell me more about you two. How did you meet? What was your relationship like? I'd like to know. Did you talk about your banishment?
Garin eagerly answered.
I was not the first half-blood in the clan.
He spoke under her watchful gaze.
The elves are very protective of their own. Although they recognize that half the blood of a half-breed is foreign and therefore despicable, they are also conscious that the other half is elven, and thus they feel obliged to protect it. The clan has a duty to support any child of no one, which is how they really see us, until he or she comes of age. Then we are banished from the garden. He and I were always very different from the other elves of our age. He much more than I. We learned to grow together and to need each other. I was fascinated by his strength, his charisma, his inexhaustible energy, and the passion he put into everything he did. He was attracted to my ability to listen, and the fact that I always went along with his suggestions, no matter how crazy, dangerous, or stupid they seemed. My good humour, you might say. But what is really worth mentioning was the ease with which we could get into trouble. Whenever I think back to those days long ago, he was always planning some or other mischief. And I see myself as the unfortunate one who supported everything that came out of his head. We supported each other, I think. That's how we faced adversity. We grew up together, and one day we became men. The real test came the day before my banishment. Not only would I have to leave the forest of my birth forever, but everything that had mattered to me up to that point would be torn away from me. From my home, my sister, my most sacred bonds. And most importantly, I would be separated from him. I knew that day would come, but I always wanted to see it as something far away, something that would pass without touching me. I think that morning was the moment when I really began to know him, to see without limitation what was hidden in him.
It was very early in the morning. The ground near the stream was covered by a misty cloak, hiding the green of the forest from view. The birds had not yet started to sing, and there was an eerie stillness in the air. Nothing disturbed the tranquility of the forest. Only the hooves of Alwen's white mount crossing the icy current of the river pierced the silence with a loud splash. He did not yet bear the deep marks of experience, those weathered features that would one day bring so much charisma and mystery to his gaze. And his face did not yet show the shadow of a shaved beard. His face was that of a child. His body did not yet display his strong and powerful muscles, nor did his legendary sword hang from his belt. However, his raven black hair was already long and luxurious, and he was inclined to adorn it. In his eyes, there was that enigmatic spark that heralded the forging of an indomitable soul.
Garin! Garin!
His cries resonated loudly in this quiet place, echoing into 1,000 voices as they rebounded among the immense number of trees and drifted off into the distance. Startled, the nearby birds took flight. Horse and rider were restless. The animal circled the same spot, treading the cold current of the river that flowed gently over the moss and mist-covered boulders. Wisps of steam escaped from the surface and joined the layer of mist that covered the forest. He called out again, but only received silence in response as the echoes of his voice faded away. However, the young dwarf half-breed was sure that his companion was there. The horse kept turning this way and that, making the task of scanning the area around him much easier.
Garen, damn it! Answer me! I know you're there!
An arrow whizzed past his face, only to embed its deadly point in the sturdy wood of a tree that had spread its roots along the shore. Alwen shook the bridle of his immaculate steed to turn in the direction from which the projectile had come. His eyes were already charged with the ferocity that still inflames his pupils. Out of the dense mass of trees and thick fog came the slender, graceful form of Garin. In his hands, he carried a bow. A quiver of arrows hung from his belt. Even then, he was already taller than his friend. And in these days, his body was more grown up and mature than that of his younger companion. His golden curls were a little shorter. However, in his ever hairless face, his eyes still reflected the innocence of a creature unaware of what lay beyond the wall of trees that marked the border between the elven realm and the rest of the world, to where he would be exiled from that day on.
I would have killed you if I had wanted to,
he said arrogantly as he approached.
Then you are on the wrong side, Garen. My father says that one who does not know his friends from his enemies is one whose steps are numbered.
Garin paused on the riverbank, in front of the cold, flowing water.
Who told you I was here? And what are you doing with a packed horse?
Garin was surprised to see him so early in this isolated place, but even more surprised that he had fully equipped and loaded his horse with saddlebags and traveling gear.
I thought you would be blubbering like a frightened child,
he replied.
I'm not crying.
Garin shouted loudly to his friend.
But you don't know what I'm going through.
The young man felt despondent. A wave of sadness washed over him, as if the whole world weighed on his back. And so, a deep air of seriousness overcame his usual good humor.
Tomorrow will be the big day, you know,
Garin said to his young friend.
Tomorrow, at first light, just like now. When Yelm's rays break over the horizon and pierce the green barrier of these very trees, I will have completed another year, and from his hand I will receive my coming of age. Then the Sancheri will gather me before the temple of Elias, and the patriarchs will proclaim to the clan that they are no longer bound to me. That I, Garin, son of elves and humans, son of no one, no longer belong to the clan, and that I must leave these lands by the second twilight. They will say that I am no longer a Sancheri, that I am not worthy to be among the elves, nor their forests, nor their cults, nor their laws, nor their rights, nor their women. That everything that made up my only reality is no longer mine. Tomorrow, Alwen,
he said sadly, looking up at his friend.
I will part from here, leaving all my memories behind, and I will never again set foot on these paths that have inspired my lyre with so many verses. I shall never again set eyes on those young women who have made me sigh so often. I will never see you again, my friend, nor you, nor my sister.
The boy's lips fought to control themselves. It is not known if they meant to cry in sadness or scream in anger.
By all the gods, Alwen, tomorrow I will be no different than I was today, or years ago. And I will still need now what I needed then. We are no different, Alwen. We bleed like elves. We think like elves. We feel like an elf. By Alder, we are elves. Half of our blood is elf blood. I have been nothing else, and I will not know how to be anything else. I have been woven into their forests, with their people. I have their language, their poetry, their music. We have their bodies. But tomorrow there will be nothing, it will all be over.
Not tomorrow, Garin. We are leaving today. Now!
Alwen announced flatly.
I have brought your things.
Today? Now.
The young man asked with a frown, thinking it was a joke.
And what do you mean, we are leaving, Alwen?
Alwen tugged at the reins to calm his horse, which had become restless again.
Exactly what you have just heard.
He said with such authority that he even silenced Garin.
I'm coming with you.
Are you out of your mind? You're still a child. I'm supposed to be the one who's of age. What do you want? To get into trouble? By Elio, Alwen. What are you trying to prove? Why are you doing all this?
The fiery nature of his dwarven blood was reflected in his words. No other elf would have spoken as he did.
Tomorrow will be their great day, Garin. All those who turn away from you in contempt will smile at last tomorrow, for they will be able to tell you to your face that your blood is not like theirs or their children's. Don't be fooled, Garin, and just accept it. You are not a pure-blood elf, and you never will be. And there will always be someone to remind you of that. You think you are an elf. You feel you are, but you are not. And that is how they will justify driving you out tomorrow. It doesn't matter what you or I say, or what you think or feel. None of them care. They have their laws and I will gladly use them to decree your banishment. Tomorrow it will be you, my friend, and I will be left counting the days until I too am forced to leave. Which will not come tomorrow, Garin, nor at dawn, nor in a season or two. But it will come. Then their teeth will gleam again as they smile broadly while speaking my name before the temple of Elio. And they will feel victorious yet again when they see me cross the border. Never forget that half your blood is Vihari, while half mine is of the enemy. I will not give them that pleasure. I will not wait for the laws to decide the day that I should leave this forest. I will not let their sarcasm and solemn words dictate that I am no longer welcome to those who are half my race. Perhaps I am only a child, as they all say. Perhaps it will be some years before the laws consider that I can stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need their laws to tell me anything. To the pit of Sogna with their laws and those who apply them in the name of their false justice. To Sogna, to all those who think we are like Doro's progeny. Who needs them? My father once told me that my heart was the only voice worth listening to, and the only law that was worth obeying. He told me that I could defeat the outside world if I could defeat myself. That is why we will go together. Because I'm not afraid of what's out there, beyond the edge of the forest, Garin. It can't be worse than what's inside me.
I understood that day that he would never be like me. He had never felt like an elf, and never would. There was as much of the elf in him as there was in me, but that temper, that overpowering tempestuous temper, could only come from the dwarves. The mixture of enemy blood, the mixture of 2 mighty egos, the pride of the elves and the courage of the dwarves. The elegance and the rudeness, the fire and the ice, all that gave birth to Olwen, and no other explanation can be understood. My heart would never beat in the same rhythm as his. If I feel doubts about my identity, his stubborn resolve is terrible and constant. There are others like me, but none who walk between the 2 worlds as he does.
The night was passing quicker than they realized. Time had seemed to stand still during Garin's story. Calla walked relentlessly across the black canopy of the star-studded sky. Claudia's eyes were drawn to the impenetrable density of the forest, where the mysterious warrior with the long ebony hair wandered in its shadows. Perhaps she had been too quick to judge him. She did not know for sure, She was very confused. The only thing she knew for certain was that, ever since she had met him in that wagon, her heart fluttered whenever she felt his presence close by, or even if she simply heard his name or recalled his image. And it was not like her. It had never been like her. Garin watched her as she gazed into the shadows of the forest. He realized where her thoughts had wandered, so he decided to bring the conversation to a close.
Don't judge him too harshly, even if he deserves it sometimes.
With that, the elf managed to regain the young woman's attention. She looked at him with a vacant expression, as if her mind was far away. Garin realized there was a gulf between them that he found disturbing.
You have seen his temper. If he accepted your company, it was only because you asked him to.
Well, it wasn't an outright yes.
She reminded him. Garin smiled.
But I know what Alwen saw in your eyes, and why he could not refuse to help you.
The young woman looked at him a little confused.
What do you mean?
Strangely, you remind him. You remind us of a person.
Claudia was stunned.
Me? Who do I remind you of?
Garin paused a moment before answering, as if he doubted whether he was doing the right thing. Perhaps he had spoken too much. Alwen would not forgive him if that were the case. After a few seconds of silence, the elf decided to be honest with her.
To the woman Alwen carved on the hilt of his sword.
Garin looked up at the sky, which covered the forest with its black belt of stars. Something caused him to sigh.
Whom he has gone to meet tonight.